Well, it seems to me every week I say to you, Michael, God, that week flew, but it's funny, the days are long and the weeks are short. Time is really strange at the moment. And when we do the work of the week, we also kind of jump into a bit of a time machine as well. And it is a portal. It's an opportunity to go back in time and look at a person, a work of art from Cork. And in this case, we're going back to the mid-1920s, and we're starting a story that begins in Ballincollig and goes on through the Crawford Gallery, which was a school at the time, a school of art. And what we're looking at this week is not what we've been looking at every week up to now. The work of the week this week is in 3D. Now, you've a lot to explain there. Who are we talking about, and what kind of rubbish am I talking about?
Well, we'll get to the rubbish.
Okay.
So we're talking about the artist Joseph Higgins,
Yep.
who was born in Ballincollig, and his dates would be 1885 to 1925, so actually quite a short life.
Yeah.
But he had such a fascinating background and a fascinating career. And, of course, our 3D angle here is that he was a sculptor, both in wood, plaster, and then latterly his work was cast in bronze.
The piece that we're looking at is a piece that's cast in bronze, and it's called On Strachaire Fir. Now, translate that for me.
So, Strachaire Fir means the strapping man, or strapping as in kind of broad-shouldered, quite a physical presence. And the sculpture itself, the original plaster model that he would have made, probably made around 1916. Yeah. But in 1923, we requested that it be cast in bronze, and we purchased it the following year. But on Strachaire Fir, just a head and shoulders bronze sculpture, life-size, essentially. Yeah. And these are wonderful broad shoulders. He's wearing a jacket, and his head is slightly downcast and turning towards his right shoulder. Yeah. And so he's very kind of thoughtful, but very, very powerful. And you can see very fit. His face is quite lean and taut.
Is this a tribute to the working man, or is it just a tribute to a strong-minded man, or what would you read into it?
Well, I suppose a lot of Higgins's work, he made toys for his children in wood, and he did portraits of people he knew, including Daniel Corkery. But I think with this and another work we have in the collection by him called Toiler of the Sea, both of them are definitely about working everyday people. Yeah. That kind of weather-beaten face, hard workers, and he wasn't too far from a hard worker himself. Yeah. Doing night classes in the Crawford to learn his craft while also working a day job.
And where did he work during the day?
He worked in Newsom and Sons, which probably won't be known to many people now, but they had premises on Patrick Street and French Church Street. And so they were grocers, tea and coffee dealers, and so on. And so he would have been working in the French Church Street branch, which I think later became a clothes shop. But, it's interesting to think that he was working in Newsom and Sons on French Church Street, and then walking around the corner, probably just straight after work, he would pop into the Crawford on Emmet Place and do his night classes.
Extraordinary. And he got quite a few awards for his work, even though he was quite young, early on in his career as a sculptor, which was short-lived.
Yeah, he starts working in Newsom and Sons in the first decade of the 20th century, and then he starts taking night classes around probably 1906 or so onwards. And that's where he met his wife, actually, as well. She was a fellow artist. But he won prizes in the South Kensington competitions. South Kensington in London, it was a school system that Cork and Belfast were included in at the time. Yeah. He won an RDF prize in Dublin, and then, of course, in 1924, he won a bronze medal in the Tallon Games, so the Irish Olympics, essentially.
That's right, because art was actually an Olympic sport. Didn't Yeats win medals as well?
Absolutely. So Jack Butler Yeats, William's little brother, won Ireland's first Olympic medal, the silver for painting, in 1924, and in the same year Higgins is winning the bronze for our own Irish Olympics for sculpture.
Good on you. Listen, the story actually gets more and more interesting the more you dig down, because there's a big connection there. Not alone did he meet his wife in the gallery, but went on to have quite a few kids.
They did indeed, yes. Now, they had 4 children who survived into adulthood. Principally among them was Mairead Higgins, who was born in 1919. She would later marry Seamus Murphy, the sculptor.
Yes.
But she herself was an artist, a designer, a teacher. Really interesting couple, I think, for Cork.
I'm just reading the blog on this week's Work of the Week, and we also found out that in history, he was given the job of informing Terence MacSweeney's wife, Muriel, about his arrest in 1920. And what was the connection there?
It's quite a dense story in that Higgins's father was a Fenian back in the late 19th century, and he actually lost his job as a teacher. Yeah. Because he was found out to be a Fenian, and therefore ended up working in the Ballincollig gunpowder mills. And that's where Higgins grew up with his siblings, including Patrick Higgins, who would have then joined the volunteers leading up to the rising in Cork and afterwards, so through 1916, through into independence. While he was working in Newsom & Sons, he would have come into contact, obviously, with Terence MacSweeney, who also worked for that company. And then also Daniel Corkery probably met him in art school. So there was a real kind of strong Gaelic League, nationalist, volunteer background there that he grew up in.
And in Fitzgerald's Park in Cork, you can actually see some of Joseph Higgins' work on display as well, not just in the gallery. Yes,
so part of the sculpture park, Fitzgerald Park, you have works by Seamus Murphy and others, but one, I think, really beloved sculpture is called Boy with Boat. Just a little boy modelled on Joseph Higgins' nephew that sits with a boat just on the side of the pond, right in the heart of the park. So everyone who passes by, that was a work that he made in 1910, but it would have been cast in bronze later by Seamus Murphy.
So there you are. For those of you who are listening who can go for a walk in Fitzgerald's Park, you can look at a work of art by the artist we're featuring on this week's Work of the Week. But if you can't make the walk, you can catch it online and have a look at on Strachaire Fir, the strapping man. And before we go, I've actually made a connection between you, Michael, and the artist himself, Joseph Higgins. So if you allow me to do my 6 degrees of separation, Joseph Higgins would marry...
He married Catherine Turnbull,
whom he met at art school, and they had 4 children. And unfortunately, he died in 1925 of TB, just aged 39, but their daughter was the artist, designer and teacher Mairead, who would later marry sculptor Seamus Murphy. And Seamus Murphy is the father of Colin Murphy, who's a fine artist in his own right and also a fantastic musician, trad musician and bodhrán player, probably one of the best in the country. And he's a friend of mine, and sometimes I'd meet him for a tipple in the Corner House, which is just down the road from where you are, and you know me. So there's the connection.
That is brilliant.
I think you've made your own connection through your mother as well. There's a connection, isn't there?
Well, yeah. So my mum would have gone to Scolita and Sculptura. Mairead Murphy, Joseph Higgins' daughter, would have been teaching at that time. My mother took art lessons from her.
There you have it. I think that's a much more succinct connection than the one that I rambled around with. In the meantime, take care, Michael. It's great to have a look at this week's Work of the Week.
Brilliant.
Thanks a million, Michael. Thank you. And that's this week's featured Work of the Week from the Crawford Art Gallery. And if you want a view on Strachaire Fir by Joseph Higgins from 1924, just simply go online to crawfordartgallery.ie/Work of the Week. And while you're in crawfordartgallery.ie, you can find plenty of other things to do for children and for the family, for adults, for communities, for schools, and even the archives of the gallery are all available online until the day comes when they can open up their doors and you can go in and personally have a look at this week's Work of the Week, featured in the Crawford Art Gallery every week.